Baron Elmsworth was not asleep. His eyes were shut, his breathing steady and deep, his body slack in the dark leather of his study chair. To any observer, he appeared as a weary magnate surrendering to exhaustion. But beneath his closed lids, Elmsworth's mind was alert, patient, and coldly observant. This was not rest. It was a trap, meticulously set, and he was waiting for the spring. It was a game the Baron played only once a decade, a test born of bitterness and betrayal. At 68, Elmsworth owned skyscrapers, estates, and enough wealth to buy anything but trust. His own children had schemed against him. His closest aides had stolen from him. Now, in the dim blue light of his private study, the Baron had laid his bait. The door of his antique safe stood open, revealing a neat stack of $10,000 bills and a rare gold pocket watch glinting under the lamplight. He waited, perfectly still, for the arrival of the latest subject, a 7-year-old boy named Koa, the son of his newest housekeeper. The boy would be left alone here, with the wealth exposed and the Baron pretending to sleep. Elmsworth's theory was simple. Every soul had a price. Today, he expected final proof. Amara's knuckles were white where she gripped her son's small shoulder, her other hand clenched around the handle of her cleaning caddy. The air in Mrs. Higgins's pantry office was thick with the smell of lemon polish and stale disapproval. "Please," Amara whispered, the words scraping her throat raw. "It's just for an hour. The school called there was a gas leak. He has nowhere else to go." Mrs. Higgins, the housekeeper whose spine seemed made of the same iron as the estate's gates, did not look up from her ledger. "You know the rules, Amara. No children. Not in the main house, especially not today." The pause was heavy, meaningful. Today was the deep cleaning day for the Baron's private study, a task Amara had been dreading since she was hired. "He will be a ghost," Amara promised, her voice trembling. She gave Koa's shoulder a gentle squeeze, feeling the delicate bones beneath his thin sweater. "He will not make a sound. He will not touch a thing. He will sit in the corner and read his book." She'd thrust the worn picture book into his hands that morning, a pathetic shield against the opulence of Elmsworth Manor. Finally, Mrs. Higgins's cold eyes lifted, traveling over Amara's desperate face before landing on Koa. He stood perfectly still, dwarfed by a pair of bright yellow rubber gloves that swallowed his hands and reached nearly to his elbows. Amara's smallest pair, still comically large. His wide, dark eyes looked back at her, unblinking. 1 hour. Mrs. Higgins relented, the words a sentence, not a reprieve. "You take him into the study with you. He sits in the far chair by the globe. He does not move. He does not speak. And for God's sake, keep those gloves on his hands. I will not have fingerprints on the Baron's artifacts." She returned to her ledger, the dismissal final. "If he so much as breathes too loudly, you are both finished." Relief was a cold wave that left Amara shaky. She guided Koa out of the pantry and into the cavernous, echoing hallway, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the marble. As they approached the massive oak door to the study, she knelt, her skirts pooling around her. She took his gloved hands in hers. "Koa, listen to me," she said, her voice low and urgent, her eyes searching his. "The man in that room is Baron Elmsworth. He is a very serious man. You must be a shadow. Do you understand? Sit where I put you. Do not look at him. Do not go near his desk. And whatever you do," she squeezed his hands, the rubber squeaking softly, "do not touch anything, especially not the big metal box with the open door. That is not for us." Fear, sharp and metallic, coated her tongue. She had heard stories about the Baron's temper, his ruthless nature. Losing this job meant losing everything. "Just be still, my love. Be still and silent, and this will all be over soon." She pushed the heavy door open, the scent of old leather and fine whiskey wafting out. The room was bathed in a dim, blue-tinged light from a single tall lamp, and there, In a high-backed leather chair was the Baron. His head tilted back, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. Asleep, Amara's breath hitched. She pointed to a low, upholstered chair in the corner, far from the desk, far from the softly glowing safe whose door stood invitingly open. She gave Koa one last, pleading look, then turned to her cart, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had just placed her most precious thing in the lion's den, and the lion was only pretending to sleep. What would you do if you were in Koa's tiny shoes, alone in a room with a sleeping giant and a fortune in plain sight? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're feeling the tension already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The door clicked shut behind Amara with a sound of finality that vibrated in Koa's chest. He was alone. The silence in the study was not empty. It was a thick, heavy thing, pressed down by the weight of dark wood, towering bookshelves, and the sleeping giant in the chair. Koa sat rigidly on the very edge of the cushion, as his mother had instructed, the oversized yellow gloves resting in his lap like two strange, deflated suns. He clutched his picture book but did not open it. The images of friendly animals felt like a lie here. His eyes, wide and unblinking, swept the room. It was the biggest room he had ever been in, bigger than their whole apartment. Moonlight filtered through a crack in the heavy velvet curtains, catching the gilt edges of books and the glass eyes of a stuffed fox on a shelf. The air smelled like his grandfather's old trunk. Dust, paper, and something rich and unfamiliar. His gaze skittered past the giant desk, past the strange celestial globe, and landed, inevitably, on the safe. It was like a small, square cave of light in the dark wall. Inside, neat stacks of green paper with big numbers and a round, shiny watch that gleamed like a captured piece of the sun. His mother's warning echoed. That is not for us. He understood. It was like the pretty glass ornaments in the department store at Christmas. You looked, but you did not touch. Then his attention shifted to the Baron. The man was immense, even in sleep. One of his hands draped over the arm of the leather chair, his fingers long and pale, a heavy signet ring on one finger. Koa watched the slow rise and fall of his chest. The Baron's hand was positioned right on the very edge of the armrest, looking as if it might slip off at any moment. Koa's own mother sometimes napped in her chair after a long shift, and her hand would fall, waking her with a start. He knew the feeling. Any second now, Baron Elmsworth thought, his mind a coiled spring behind the mask of sleep. The boy will look, then he will want, then he will take. It is the oldest equation in the world. He tracked the child's gaze through slitted eyelids, noting the long pause on the safe. There. See? The calculation begins. He waited for the furtive glance, the shuffling feet, the greedy reach. He anticipated the moment the small, gloved hands would close around the cash, the moment his theory would be proven once and for all. The boy was a mouse, and the cheese was in plain sight. The trap was perfect, but the mouse did not move. Minutes stretched, marked only by the loud tick of a grandfather clock in the corner. The boy just sat, a statue in yellow, his attention now seemingly fixed on the Baron's own hand. A strange feeling, cold and unwelcome, began to prickle at the back of the Baron's neck. This was not part of the calculation. This was silence, not suspense. This was stillness, not anticipation. The boy was supposed to be drawn to the wealth, to the glittering proof of human frailty. Why was he looking at him? Koa shifted ever so slightly on the chair, the leather sighing beneath him. The Baron's heart gave a single, hard thump. Now. Starts now. He braced for the creak of floorboards, the soft shuffle toward the safe. But the boy's eyes, filled with a quiet, unsettling observation, remained locked not on the money, but on the Baron's perilously placed hand. The equation was failing, and in the heavy silence, Baron Elmsworth felt the first, faint crack in the foundation of his bitter, lonely world. The tick of the clock became a hammer in the silence. Koa's legs were starting to tingle from sitting so still, but his mother's warning was a steel band around his chest. Be a shadow. Yet, his eyes kept drifting back to the Baron's hand. It had slipped a fraction further, the pale fingertips now dangling in empty air. In Koa's world, things that fell broke. His mother's favorite mug. The vase his father had sent from overseas. Once something tipped past the edge, there was no grabbing it back. A small, internal war raged. Do not touch anything. The rule was absolute. But the sight of that hand, so close to falling, felt like a different kind of rule being broken, a rule of care. He remembered helping his grandfather, whose hands sometimes trembled, steady a cup of tea. This was the same, wasn't it? It wasn't touching the things. It was touching a person to help. Slowly, with infinite care, he slid off the chair. The floorboard let out a soft, ghostly groan. Across the room, the Baron's breathing hitched for a millisecond before returning to its deep, fake rhythm. Finally, the thought was a silent shout in Elmsworth's mind. The approach begins. He's coming for the safe. He felt a savage, vindictive thrill. The mouse was taking the bait. He prepared himself for the sight of small, yellow hands rifling through his money. But the soft, shuffling steps did not move toward the glowing safe. They moved toward him. A wave of pure, unanticipated shock froze the Baron's internal monologue. This was wrong. This was completely, fundamentally wrong. He could sense the small presence drawing nearer, could smell the faint, clean scent of laundry soap. What game was this? Was the boy brazen enough to pick his pocket first? Rage, hot and immediate, began to simmer beneath his feigned sleep. He would have the child arrested on the spot. Koa stopped beside the great leather chair. He looked enormous from here, a mountain of a man. Up close, Koa could see the deep lines carved around his mouth, the weary set of his jaw even in sleep. He looked less like a giant and more like a very tired person. The hand was the issue. Focusing on the task, Koa carefully lifted his own right hand, the yellow rubber fingers clumsy and oversized. He held his breath. He did not grab. He did not pull. With a touch so gentle it was barely a whisper, he used the back of his gloved fingers to nudge the Baron's limp hand. He pushed it, slowly and carefully, from its precarious perch on the edge back onto the broad, flat safety of the armrest. He adjusted it so it lay comfortably, palm down, the signet ring glinting dully. There. Safe. The Baron, inside his paralyzed shell, was reeling. The sensation had not been a pickpocket's grab. It had been a guidance, a careful, almost respectful repositioning. It made no sense. It was an action devoid of greed, devoid of fear even. It was simple, practical care. The rage dissolved, replaced by a bewildered, roaring emptiness. His theory had no variable for this. His trap had been sprung not by theft, but by a child's instinct to prevent a sleeping man's hand from falling. Koa let out a tiny, silent sigh of satisfaction. He had fixed it. He took a small step back, his mission accomplished. He glanced once more at the safe, its contents still exposed. Another rule echoed in his head, one about cleanliness and order. His mother's voice, we put things away. Exposed things get dusty. He looked at the discarded dust cloth on his mother's cleaning cart. He looked at the open safe. The hand was safe, but the money and the watch were not put away. They were just waiting to get dusty. Can you believe what just happened? The Baron set a trap for greed, and Koa walked right past the money to perform an act of pure kindness. What do you think is going through the Baron's mind right now? Drop your theories in the comments below and hit that like button if you're as stunned as he is. Don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. The boy was moving again. Baron Elmsworth, his mind still churning from the seismic shift of the last moment, tracked the small, yellow-clad figure through a haze of utter confusion. The child had turned away from him. Now surely he would go to the safe. The bizarre interlude of care was over. The true nature of man would reassert itself. Now, it must be now. The Baron's internal voice was less certain now, almost pleading with the universe to obey his cynical logic. Koa walked, not with stealth, but with the deliberate pace of someone with a chore. He passed the towering desk, its surface a landscape of polished obsidian and brass. He ignored it. He went straight to his mother's cleaning cart, its metal frame gleaming dully. He picked up the large, soft dust cloth she had used earlier, its faint smell of lemon oil comforting in the strange room. What is he doing? The Baron's thoughts were frantic, scrambling. Was he going to wrap the money in the cloth? To muffle the sound as he stuffed it into his pockets? A fresh, bitter anger began to bloom. So the child was clever. He'd used a feint of kindness to lower the guard, and now he was employing a tool of service to facilitate the theft. The elegance of it almost impressed Elmsworth. Almost. Koa approached the safe. The light from within cast his small shadow long and distorted against the dark wood paneling. He stopped right in front of the open door, looking at the stack of bills and the brilliant watch. The Baron held his breath, his muscles tensing beneath the guise of sleep. This was the moment of truth. The moment the small, gloved hand would reach in and confirm every dark belief he'd ever held. Koa lifted the dust cloth. He did not reach for the money. Instead, he leaned forward and, with a careful, almost reverent motion, draped the large square of fabric over the mouth of the safe. He tucked the corners gently around the stack of cash, covering it completely. He arranged the cloth so it also shrouded the gold watch, its gleam now hidden. He smoothed the fabric once, his oversized glove patting it down. Then he took a small step back, his head tilting as he examined his work. His whispered words, meant for no one but himself and the room, were barely audible. "Mother says exposed things get dusty," he murmured to the now-veiled Fortune. Not safe. Inside Baron Elmsworth something shattered. It was not a loud break, but a deep, silent collapse, like a glacier calving into a dark sea. The sound was the death of his theory, the implosion of a worldview built over decades of betrayal and loneliness. He had expected greed, cunning, opportunistic theft. He had prepared for every variation of human avarice. He had not prepared for this. This was not cleverness. It was instinct. It was a child internalizing a lesson about tidiness and applying it with solemn duty. The safe wasn't a temptation. It was an untidy shelf. The $10,000 were not a fortune. They were things that needed to be put away so they wouldn't get dusty. The purity of the action was so absolute, so blinding, that it left the Baron mentally gasping. The trap hadn't just failed. It had been rendered meaningless, absurd. The mouse had not taken the cheese. The mouse had, with profound innocence, covered the cheese with a napkin because it was the proper thing to do. A profound, aching void opened up where his cynicism had been. He felt exposed, foolish, and profoundly seen in a way he had not been in years. The boy, with a simple dust cloth, had not just covered money. He had exposed the barren, impoverished state of the Baron's own soul. The game was over. He had lost. And for the first time in decades, losing did not feel like bitterness. It felt like the first painful breath of air after being submerged in ice. The study door handle turned. The door swung open, and Amara stepped back into the study, a fresh bottle of polish in her hand. Her eyes, seeking her son, found him immediately, standing directly in front of the Baron's open safe. The world stopped. The bottle slipped from her numb fingers, thudding dully on the thick Persian rug but not breaking. Her heart did. "Koa!" she breathed, the name a prayer and a curse. In that instant of frozen maternal terror, Baron Elmsworth made a decision. The old script, the one written in bitterness, was ashes. But a new, more terrifying script unfolded in his mind, driven by a desperate, newfound need. He had to know. He had to see the depth of this. The test was not over. It had just changed into something far more cruel and far more important. He stirred in his chair, letting out a low, deliberate groan as if waking from deep sleep. He blinked slowly, then his gaze, now sharp, awake, and blazing with manufactured fury, landed on Koa, then on Amara, then on the cloth-draped safe. "What?" he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the silent room. "Is going on here?" Amara rushed forward, grabbing Koa and pulling him behind her skirts, as if to shield him from cannon fire. "Baron Elmsworth, sir. I am so sorry, he was just sitting, he didn't mean to." "He was at my safe," the Baron interrupted, his tone dropping to a dangerous, icy calm. He rose to his feet, seeming to fill the room, his shadow engulfing mother and son. He pointed a long finger at the safe. "The door was open, and now it is covered." "Why is it covered?" He took a step closer. "What did you hide underneath that cloth, boy?" "And nothing, sir," Amara cried, tears springing to her eyes. "He's just a child. He doesn't understand. He understands enough to approach a private safe." Elmsworth boomed, his performance flawless, a lifetime of commanding boardrooms lending him terrifying authority. He strode to the safe and, with a dramatic flourish, yanked the dust cloth away. The money and watch were revealed, untouched. He pretended to scrutinize them, then whirled back, his eyes narrowing. "It's not the money," he hissed, the lie forming on his lips with chilling ease. "The money is all here, but something else is missing." He locked his eyes on Koa's yellow-gloved hands. "A key. A small, antique silver key to my late wife's jewelry cabinet. It was right here next to the watch, and now it is gone." Amara's face went ashen. "No, sir. Please, he wouldn't." "Wouldn't he?" The Baron took another step, looming over them. "He was alone with the safe. He was touching it. And look, he's wearing gloves. The perfect tool to pocket something small without leaving prints." He leaned down, his face inches from Koa's. "Empty your pockets, boy. Show me the gloves." Koa trembled violently, pressing himself into his mother's legs. He shook his head, mute with terror. "Very well," Elmsworth said, straightening. He walked to his desk and placed his hand on the old, black telephone. "Then we shall let the police sort it out. They have ways of finding hidden things, and of determining accountability." He looked at Amara, his gaze pitiless. "Your employment, madam, is terminated, effective immediately. I suggest you find a lawyer." The threat hung in the air, a guillotine blade. Amara's livelihood, their home, their future, all severed by a lie about a key that never existed. The Baron watched, his real heart a tight, painful knot in his chest, as the boy looked from the telephone to his mother's crumbling face. This was the ultimate test, not of greed but of character under absolute, devastating pressure. Would the truth hold, or would it break? The tension is unbearable. The Baron has raised the stakes to terrifying heights with a false accusation. What can a child possibly do against the power of a billionaire's lie? Share your support for Koa in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. If your heart is pounding, smash that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss how this ends. Amara broke. The dam of her composure shattered, and she fell to her knees on the rug, not in supplication, but in total collapse. Her hands came up, pressed together as if in prayer. "Please, Baron, I beg you, don't call the police. He's just a little boy. He's confused and scared. Take my job, yes, I understand, but please, not the police. They'll take him. They'll put him in a home." Sobs racked her frame, ugly and desperate. I'll pay. I'll pay for the key. My next month's wages. All of it. Just name the price." Baron Elmsworth watched her, the performance he'd constructed now feeling like a monstrous cage of his own making. Her anguish was real, a raw, human wound laid bare before him. It was the exact kind of vulnerability his former associates would have exploited without a second thought. The old him would have felt a grim satisfaction. The man staring at her now felt only a deep, cavernous shame. But he had to see it through. He had to know what metal the boy was made of. "Your wages?" he sneered, forcing contempt into his voice. He gestured dismissively at the safe. "That key is an heirloom. Its value is sentimental, which makes it priceless. Your wages are a pittance against a memory." He let the cruelty hang, watching Koa. The boy had tears streaming silently down his cheeks, but he wasn't hiding behind his mother anymore. He had stepped slightly to the side, his small body trembling but upright, those enormous yellow gloves hanging by his sides. "The debt is not monetary," the Baron continued, his voice dropping to a calculated, thoughtful tone. He paced slowly, a predator circling. "It is a debt of honor, a theft of trust. The boy took something that belonged to me." He stopped and pointed directly at Koa. "So he must give something of his in return. Not money, something that matters to him. Collateral, a token to hold until the key is returned, if it ever is." Amara stared, confused and horrified. "He has nothing, sir. Toys, a few clothes. Everyone has something," Elmsworth insisted, his gaze boring into Koa. "A treasure. Something he would not want to lose. That is the price. Give me something of yours, boy. Something you value. Place it in my hand as a promise that you will find my key and return it. Do that, and I will not call the police today. Your mother may even keep her job. For now." It was an impossible, twisted bargain. He was demanding a sacrifice to pay for a crime that never happened. He was asking the boy to buy back his mother's safety and his own freedom with a piece of his own heart. It was the most unfair thing Elmsworth had ever done, and every fiber of his being screamed at him to stop. But he waited, breath held, the fate of his own soul now hinging on the choice of a 7-year-old. Koa looked at his weeping mother. He looked at the Baron's outstretched, waiting hand. He understood the words, "Something you value." He knew what the most valuable thing in the world was. It wasn't in the safe. It was in his pocket, warm from his skin. His small face set into an expression of solemn resolve that was heartbreaking to witness. The tears didn't stop, but a new stillness came over him. He nodded once, a tiny, decisive motion. He reached into the front pocket of his trousers, past the rubber cuff of the oversized glove. His fingers closed around the small, familiar shape. He stepped forward, away from his mother's reach. He walked until he stood directly before the Baron. He didn't look up at the giant's face. He looked only at the waiting palm. Then, with a tenderness that shattered the last of Elmsworth's defenses, Koa placed his treasure into the Baron's hand. It was a small, tarnished brass compass, its glass face scratched, its needle still. A cheap, mass-produced thing worn smooth in places by small, anxious fingers. But to Koa, it was the axis of his world. "My daddy gave it to me," Koa whispered, his voice thin but clear. "He said it finds true north, so you won't get lost." He finally looked up, his eyes meeting the Baron's, filled with a pain that was too old for his face. "You can have it, to help you find the key. Maybe the key is just lost. Maybe it's not stolen. The compass can show you the true path." He offered up his most sacred possession not as a bribe, but as a guide. Not to buy forgiveness for a theft, but to help a lost man find something he claimed to have lost. In the Baron's palm, the little compass weighed nothing. And yet, it felt heavier than all the gold in his vault. It was the weight of a truth so pure it was devastating. The test was over. He had been broken utterly and completely, not by a lie, but by a truth offered in the form of a tarnished brass gift. The compass was still warm from the boy's pocket. Baron Elmsworth stared down at it, lying inert in the center of his large, lined palm. The scratched glass, the faded markings, the still needle. It was the most valuable thing he had ever been given, and it was worth less than the change in his suit pocket. The contradiction was so profound it left him dizzy. He looked from the compass to the boy's upturned face, streaked with tears but set in unwavering dignity. He looked at Amara, crumpled on the floor, her hope extinguished, awaiting the final blow. The monstrous edifice of his test, his cynicism, his entire bitter life, crumbled to dust inside him. He had set out to prove the ugliness of the human heart, and instead, he had been handed its most beautiful, unvarnished proof. A great, shuddering breath escaped him, one he felt he'd been holding for 20 years. The mask of fury, the posture of menace, simply fell away. His shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in release. The performance was over. "There is no key," he said, his voice quiet, rough with an emotion he could not name. Amara's sobs hitched. She looked up, bewildered. "The silver key does not exist," Elmsworth repeated, clearer now. He closed his fingers gently around the compass, holding it safe. "It was never here. It was a fabrication. A lie." He knelt. It was an awkward, unfamiliar motion for a man of his size and stature, but he lowered himself until he was on one knee, bringing his eyes level with Koa's. The boy flinched but held his ground. "This," Elmsworth said, opening his hand to show the compass again, "was the final test. And I have failed it. Not you." His throat tightened. "I have spent a lifetime believing the worst of people. I built walls and set traps to prove I was right to be lonely. Today I set a trap for you, Koa. The money, the watch, my pretended sleep. I waited for you to take something, so I could say, 'See, everyone has a price.'" He glanced at the safe, then back to the boy's wide eyes. "You did not take. You covered. You saw my hand and you put it right." The memory of that gentle nudge humbled him more than any business failure ever had. "And when I accused you, threatened your mother, demanded payment for a sin you did not commit, you gave me the one thing your father left you, to help me find what was lost." He bowed his head for a moment, a silent apology to the ghost of the man he used to be. When he looked up, his eyes were bright. "You have shown me the true path, and it was not to a missing key. It was back to myself." He stood, his knees cracking, and turned to Amara. He offered his hand to help her up. She took it, trembling, her legs unsteady. "The $10,000 in that safe," he said, pointing. "It is yours. A bonus. Not for your work, but for raising a son who carries a compass in his pocket while the rest of the world is lost. It is non-negotiable." Amara opened her mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. "And for you, Koa," he said, turning back. He knelt again, holding the compass between them. "A covenant. I will keep this, to remind me of the true north you showed me today. In return, you will spend 1 hour with me each day after your school. Here, in this library. You will tell me about your book. You will ask me questions. You will, quite simply, keep me company. And in return for that hour," his voice grew thick, "I will fund your education. Every book, every school, every university, for as long as you wish to learn. All the way through a doctorate if that is your dream. That is my pledge." He held out his hand, not to take, but to seal a promise. Koa, after a moment's hesitation, placed his small, gloved hand in the Baron's large, bare one. The rubber squeaked softly. The deal was struck, not in a boardroom, but on a Persian rug, with a tarnished compass as the witness. The Baron had not gained a servant or a sycophant. He had gained a guide, and Koa had not lost a treasure. He had, unknowingly, purchased a future. This moment of redemption is so powerful it gives me chills. The Baron's entire life just changed direction because of a child's integrity. What do you think of his offer? Is it enough? Let's discuss in the comments. And if this story is moving you, please take a second to like, subscribe, and share where you're joining us from. It means the world. The following days in Elmsworth Manor were painted in a new, unfamiliar light. The heavy silence that usually clung to the halls like dust began to lift, displaced by the soft, rhythmic tick of the library clock and the occasional, hesitant murmur of conversation. True to his word, Baron Elmsworth sent a bank manager to Amara's modest apartment with a cashier's check for $10,000 and a legally binding document outlining the educational trust for Koa. Amara, upon seeing the figures, had wept again, but this time from a relief so profound it left her weak. Each afternoon at 4 o'clock, Koa would arrive at the study, now without the yellow gloves, his small school satchel slung over his shoulder. The first day he had sat in the same corner chair, silent and watchful. The Baron, for his part, had struggled. He was a man who commanded boardrooms, not conversed with children. He had gruffly offered lemonade, which Koa sipped politely. "What is that book?" Elmsworth had finally asked, pointing to the worn volume Koa clutched. "It's about a lighthouse," Koa said softly, "and the keeper who saves ships in the fog." "Ah," the Baron said, "a guide, like a compass." He had gestured to his desk, where the tarnished brass compass now sat on a stand of polished walnut, a humble jewel in a place of honor. "Would you read it to me?" And so Koa read. His voice was small at first, then grew stronger as he lost himself in the tale of storms and safety beacons. The Baron listened, truly listened, not to the words so much as to the sound of innocence filling his tomb of a study. He asked questions about the ships, about the fog, about why the keeper stayed when he was so alone. "He stayed because people needed the light," Koa explained, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. The answer struck Elmsworth like a physical blow. He had been a black hole, sucking in wealth and giving back nothing but darkness. This child, with his simple stories, was shining a light he hadn't realized he was drowning in. The hours became the highlight of the Baron's day. He learned of Koa's father, a merchant sailor lost at sea, the compass his final gift. He learned of Amara's struggles, of their dreams. In turn, hesitantly, he shared fragments of his own past. Not the betrayals and bitterness, but older, faded memories of a boy who liked to watch trains, of a young man who wanted to build things. He showed Koa how the celestial globe worked, their heads bent together under the lamplight. The change in the Baron was slow but visible. The staff whispered about it. The cold sharpness in his eyes softened. He began taking walks in the gardens he never used. He donated anonymously to the school Koa attended. The monstrous, distrustful billionaire was receding, and in his place was emerging a quieter, wearier, but fundamentally kinder man. He was healing, and the medicine was the uncompromising honesty of a child who covered money with a cloth and offered his compass to a liar. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Koa finished a chapter and closed his book. He looked at the Baron, who was gazing at the compass on the desk. "Do you still need it?" Koa asked. "To find your way?" Elmsworth smiled, a genuine, unpracticed thing that transformed his face. "I believe I am learning the way by heart," he said, "but I will keep it always. To remember the day a true gentleman loaned me his North Star." He reached out and ruffled Koa's hair, a gesture that felt astonishingly natural. "Now, tell me about this mathematics problem you mentioned. Even billionaires need help with their sums sometimes." The restitution was not in the money given, nor in the future secured. It was in these quiet hours. The Baron was repaying a debt he could never quantify, the debt for his own soul, purchased back with a compass and paid in installments of time, attention, and slowly rediscovered humanity. 10 years later, the great hall of Elmsworth Manor was filled with a silence far deeper than the one Koa had first encountered. The room was crowded with people, but no one spoke. They were all seated in rows of black chairs, facing a somber lawyer who stood behind a mahogany lectern. The air was thick with the smell of funeral lilies and simmering anticipation. Baron Alistair Elmsworth was dead. He had passed peacefully in his sleep, the restored brass compass, now inlaid with a single, perfect diamond at its north point, resting on the bedside table beside him. The vultures, as he had privately called them, had gathered for the reading of the will. His two estranged sons and their avaricious wives sat in the front row, their faces masks of solemnity that couldn't hide the greedy gleam in their eyes. Various cousins, business partners, and sycophants filled the rest of the seats, already mentally dividing the empire. Koa, now a tall, serious young man of 17, sat in the back, dressed in a simple, dark suit. He had just finished his first year at an elite university on the Elmsworth Scholarship. He felt out of place among the glittering, entitled crowd, a ghost from the Baron's unexpected final chapter. The lawyer, an elderly man with a voice like dry paper, began to read the legal formalities. Then he reached the bequests. A collective leaning forward occurred. "To my son, Charles," the lawyer intoned, "I leave the sum of $1, and the reminder that the last time we spoke, you valued my company at precisely that amount." A gasp rippled through the hall. Charles's face turned purple. "To my son, Robert, I leave the deed to the Sterling Creek Hunting Lodge, which you so admired, and the tax liability thereon, which you consistently ignored." Robert sank lower in his chair. On and on it went. Token amounts, viciously specific symbolic gifts that were less inheritances and more public reckonings for slights, betrayals, and years of neglect. The great Elmsworth fortune, the hotels, the shipping lines, the tech firms, the estates, none of it was mentioned. A feverish whisper began to spread. Where was the money? The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. The room fell deathly silent. "The entirety of my remaining estate, including all real property, financial holdings, business interests, and personal chattels, including the contents of the safe in my private study," the lawyer read, his voice gaining strength, "I bequeath to Koa Amari, formerly the son of my housekeeper, Amara." The silence shattered into uproar. Shouts of "preposterous" and "will contest" filled the hall. Charles shot to his feet, sputtering with rage. The lawyer raised a hand, waiting for the chaos to subside. When it did not, he simply spoke louder, overriding them. "The bequest is conditional upon the recipient also accepting the accompanying letter, which is to be read aloud now, as per the testator's instructions." He unfolded a sheet of the Baron's distinctive cream stationery. He began to read, and the Baron's voice seemed to fill the room through the words. "If you are hearing this, I am gone, and you are in a room full of people wondering how the machinery of fortune could have gone so awry. Let me be clear, it has not. It has functioned with perfect precision. For most of my life, I believed wealth was the scorecard of existence. I was wrong. I learned, too late, that the only true currency is character, and character must be earned, not inherited. Years ago, I purchased my own soul back from the brink of damnation. The price was not $10,000. It was a tarnished brass compass, given freely by a boy who had nothing else to give. That transaction, made in a moment of terrified honesty, was the only legitimate business deal of my life. In that moment, Koa Amari paid the highest possible price for my legacy. He paid with his most sacred treasure to redeem a stranger's lie. Therefore, I do not give him my wealth. I am merely settling a debt. The debt of kindness. The debt for the light shown to a man who lived in darkness. He purchased every brick of this estate with an act of selfless integrity, and it is rightfully his. To my blood, who sought only the fruit of the tree, you are given the leaves. To the boy who showed me the roots, he is given the tree. May he tend it with the same compassion that saved it from rot." The lawyer finished. The hall was utterly, profoundly silent. All eyes turned to the back, to the young man who was weeping silently. One hand closed around a small, hard shape in his suit pocket, the diamond-inlaid compass, returned to him by the lawyer before the reading. Koa did not see the hatred, the jealousy, the shock. He saw only the old leather chair in a blue-lit study, a tired man pretending to sleep, and the beginning of a covenant. He stood, and without a word to the stunned, seething heirs, he walked out of the great hall. He walked past the portraits of stern Elmsworth ancestors, past the marble and the gold, and straight to the old study. He pushed the door open. The room was just as he remembered, though sunnier now. He walked to the desk. There, on the polished walnut stand, was a simple brass compass. The original. The Baron had kept his promise to preserve it always. Koa took the diamond-inlaid compass from his pocket and placed it gently beside its tarnished twin. One represented the wealth he never sought. The other represented the character that earned it. He was now one of the richest men in the world. But as he looked at the two compasses side by side, he knew with absolute certainty which one was truly valuable. The Baron's final lesson had been received. The true heir had inherited not an empire, but a direction. True north. And that, friends, is how a single act of childish honesty changed the course of a fortune and a man's soul. This story proves that the greatest wealth is the wealth of character. If this ending resonated with you, if you believe in kindness as the ultimate currency, let me know in the comments. Tell me where in the world this story found you today. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe for more tales of heart and consequence, and share this with someone who needs a reminder of what truly matters. Until next time.